Hey, good morning and welcome everyone. Dave Robinson, Kings County Sheriff and co-chair of the current RIPA board. Welcome. We appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to come today. I would actually like to start off by thanking Judge Alice Lytle for her service. She had her services a couple of weeks ago, and she was a participant for the entire time on the RIPA board from the original inception, and I always found her to just be a wealth of knowledge and always just uplifting spirit. And so to her family, we really appreciate you sharing her with us. She participated in the very last meeting that we had in early December and then passed shortly after, and so just really a special appreciation to Judge Lytle for her service. Today we have an agenda in front of us that we'll go over, and just as a reminder, the start time is pretty consistent. Everything else is just as it goes through the day. And we have a new member this morning, LaWanda Hawkins, and I would actually like to give her a couple of minutes to just tell us a little bit about herself and about the organization that she represents. So, LaWanda.
Good morning. I represent an organization called Justice for Murdered Children. We're located in Los Angeles. We assist families who've had a loved one murdered. We assist them from the crime scene through the criminal justice system. We're a nonprofit organization, and this week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week, so I'm really excited to be up here part of this time. That's basically it.
Thank you, LaWanda, and welcome aboard. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
My co-chair, Andrea Guerrero, will be arriving shortly. She had a little flight delay, so once she arrives, we'll just keep moving on through the agenda until she arrives. We won't be able to take up the meeting minutes for a vote. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Yes, I think we'll have to wait until one more, yes, I think Angela just needs to arrive, and then Angela or Andrea comes, and then we'll have a forum.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And so we'll move on to item number 3, which is the update from the Department of Justice, including presentation by the Research Center.
Yeah. Yes. So we actually, going off of what you were saying, we wanted to do a little bit of a tribute to Judge Lytle and her work. We have a little photo of her. We have a slide of her. So, as the sheriff mentioned, we lost a wonderful colleague and woman in December, and I had the opportunity to attend her celebration of life in early March, and I have included the brochure. The program from her celebration of life for all of you to view, because I found it to be, as I'm sure no one on this board will be surprised, the celebration of life featured many incredible people saying very impressive people saying wonderful things about her, and I just wanted to share a few of the just to highlight a few of the many accomplishments of her that she achieved in her very impactful life devoted to public service. So, after beginning her legal career with a series of state government posts, including Deputy Legal Affairs Secretary, Chief of the Department of Industrial Relations Division of Fair Employment Practices, and Secretary of the State Consumer Services Agency, Governor Jerry Brown appointed her to a municipal court judgeship in 1983, making her the first African-American woman judge in that court. Subsequently, after being elevated to the Superior Court in 1998, she became the first African-American female of that court, making her the first African-American female Superior Court judge in the state. While her career on the bench was marked by many accomplishments she achieved as an ardent champion of issues affecting the lives of women and children. One accomplishment in particular was her establishment of La Casita, which is a waiting room for children whose parents were at the court, and that was the first waiting room of its kind in the state of California. Sorry?
And free of charge.
In free of charge, yes. And so that has been a model, and that has been adopted throughout the state, but she was the first to adopt that. And finally, Judge Lytle's appointment to this board in 2016 was one she accepted and with pride and purpose, and she was a force on this board, as we all know, and she's, while she's certainly very missed, her unwavering dedication to the pursuit of social justice, education, and collaboration will live on, and we miss her and thank her for her work. So we wanted to do a moment of silence for her.
And I just wanted to also echo what Kelsey said. Judge Lalo was the first board member that I met in Los Angeles. She came several hours early. She was ready to go. And as you all know, she was a very, not just smart, energetic, bright woman, but she was a delight to talk to and be around. So we will miss her and her contributions to the board. And as Kelsey mentioned, her family expressed to us several times how important her work was on this board. So we would like to just honor her memory with a moment of silence.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Prior to moving on then, since Mr. Burr has arrived, should we go back to the minutes for the
Sure.
approval of the minutes? We'll go back to item number 2 then, approval of the December 5th, 2018 meeting minutes, and I believe those are in your packet. As soon as anyone has a chance to review. Approval.
I have a correction on the minutes. It looks like the minutes show that we adjourned at 10:10 a.m. I don't think that's accurate. I think it's probably 2:10.
Yes, I'll make that correction.
No, wait. Actually, I think that is correct because the December meeting started at 9 a.m. It was a very short,
It was a short meeting.
video conference meeting. I did check that myself as well.
Yeah, it was the teleconference
It was
meeting.
a teleconference meeting that was very, very short.
It's quick? That quick?
It was that quick.
So would it have been then the, under the call to order, welcome meeting remarks?
That should
Should have
be
been
9:14.
9:14.
Okay.
That makes more sense, sorry. One
Yeah.
of them was incorrect. I will make sure that's adjusted before posting.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Swing,
Second.
second by Mr. Odom. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, one abstention. Okay, now going back to DOJ for item number 3.
So as we had discussed in previous board meetings, we have been working very diligently to create a video on data integrity that is ready for your viewing and approval. We have interviewed six members of the public, so 2 academics, 2 law enforcement agents, and 2 members of the community, and we have interviewed them, had them talk about the data collection, submission, and data integrity protocols, and we have a video for you all to view. I know it might be a little bit hard.
I'm wondering if it's not too disruptive if we went on into the audience. The video is about 5 minutes long. So.
Racial and Identity Profiling Act of 2015, or RIPA, was designed to increase transparency and accountability around law enforcement. It requires peace officers to record information regarding the officer's perception of the race or ethnicity, gender, and approximate age of the person stopped. and the result of that interaction. By counting and taking inventory of routine interactions with the public, we can better understand the impact law enforcement activity has on Californians.
By collecting stop data, we at the Oakland Police Department have been able to be more transparent with our community in regards to who we make contact with and why. One way we use the data is to determine the number of stops our officers have made. With it, we can better understand what each stop was for and if it led to a citation, search, or arrest or not. We also use the data to better understand if our officers' stops are in line with the department's strategies and our goals.
We hope the data collected will bring us closer to our goal of eliminating racial profiling. The data can be used to help develop policies or remedial measures so that race or identity is not relied upon as a basis to stop or search someone. The data can help identify if officers and departmental policies are contributing to racial or identity-based disparities in stops.
With this information, researchers can quantify the extent to which policing disproportionately impacts minority communities, and we can identify factors that can be driving those patterns. By better understanding the underlying causes, we can start designing and evaluating data-driven policies to reduce racial disparities in police stops. One of the key aspects of RIPA is that it requires stop data to be collected uniformly across agencies, allowing for apples-to-apples comparisons. Data integrity checks help ensure that the reported information is both accurate and complete, and that the data can be trusted by researchers, policymakers, and the general public.
RIPA data will allow for analysis across perceived characteristics like disability, race, gender, and sexuality. With data that can analyze the many possible identities surrounding a stopped individual, the community can assess geographically and demographically where disparities may be most prevalent in order to work to fix them.
Once data has been reported, there are safeguards against disclosure of personally identifying information about members of the public.
Data integrity at its core means that the numbers reflect reality. This happens when officers record all stops fully and forthrightly, and when these records are stored and shared consistently and transparently. In order for people to be able to trust the data, it is crucial that reporting requirements and guidelines be consistent across and within departments.
The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has taken numerous steps to prepare for the commencement of data collection under RIPA. We have set a process with multiple reviews to ensure we are meeting the statutory requirements. Our system is designed to ensure accurate and complete reporting.
The integrity of stop data is checked at several phases of the collection and analysis process. First, local law enforcement agencies have set up procedures to carry out internal compliance and correctness audits, as well as supervisor reviews to ensure the data they submit meets RIPA's rigorous standards. Second, the state collection system automatically flags potential reporting errors when the data is submitted. Finally, government and academic researchers can check for anomalies when analyzing the data. If discrepancies are discovered anywhere in the pipeline, state officials can work with local jurisdictions to improve the quality of the collected data.
With comprehensive standardized data on police-civilian encounters that will become available under RIPA, we can get a much clearer sense of the rate at which people from different racial, ethnic, gender, and other groups have contact with the police, as well as what the causes and consequences of those encounters are.
RIPA data provides a shared basis for dialogue between law enforcement agencies and the communities they police. Once we have the facts before us, community members and law enforcement can share analysis, discuss lessons learned, and consider changes to policies or training procedures, all with the goal of identifying and eliminating racial disparities and reducing the number of unnecessary stops.
With this data, law enforcement will have a better understanding of interactions within our communities. RIPA is an important opportunity to understand what we are doing well as how we can strengthen our policies and procedures.
The hope is that the collection of RIPA data will shine a much needed light on the interactions that different populations in California have with law enforcement on a daily basis.
The Racial and Identity Profiling Act of 2015 is an ambitious law. With the continued dedication and hard work of all stakeholders, we will continue to implement the law and explore innovative ways to make policing more equitable and to strengthen the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they work to protect.
formal approval. We just wanted to make sure you guys were all aware before we publish it and get your feedback and how you guys view it.
Okay, I'll just put it out to the members then. Is there any additional feedback that anybody would like to offer?
Yes. How are we communicating the real intent of the use of the data, other than just to say that it's being collected and saying and identifying how each contributor puts into it? But the public will want to know what kind of redemptive values will come out of the engagement, and how the community will be made a little bit more sure in the aftermath of the launch of the RIPA board and its work and its activity, and how responsible we'll be to law enforcement, how responsive and responsible law enforcement will be both to us as an advisory board, and then to the various levels of government for the state of California, and then out to the general public. I think some reference to that may make this a little bit more palatable, a little softer around the edges for members of the community. Other than that, they may not embrace it the way we think that the value of the work and effort and energy we've put, and also law enforcement themselves have put into it to make this come about.
Yeah, I would just echo some of those sentiments, just to say that watching the video was a little discouraging to me personally, because I think it is a very safe video in terms of talking about the work that's very law enforcement friendly, and doesn't have to be law enforcement. Doesn't have to be anti-law enforcement, but someone who's done a lot of training in law enforcement spaces, it very much so looks, sounds, feels like the kinds of tools that are created for law enforcement spaces, and doesn't really speak to the notion of, like, the sentiment in the video of improving the great job being done by law enforcement, et cetera, really doesn't speak to the sentiments by which this board was created and 953 was passed. I think it's also incredibly tone deaf to what is still happening right now in the state of California. Right now, actively, community members aren't here today because many of them are going to Sacramento today and tomorrow to try to pass Assembly Bill 392, to pass a strong use of force bill, because community is continually distrustful of their law enforcement institutions. And so it just feels like the tone and the tenor of that video just does not, for me at least, feel accessible to the community members who've been taking off work and showing up at our spaces and put a lot of, I don't want to overstate it, but have put some hope that this board and others would really be focused on dealing with the racial profiling that they are experiencing. I'd have to look at the video again, but just wanted to share on the record that I feel a little bit discouraged with that end product, and really have questions around what community members were a part of any screening of it before it got into any final production, what rounds outside of our advocacy partners, what more grassroots organizations or community spaces that are dealing with people most impacted by this issue, did they have any kind of voice or influence on that final product? If we're trying to create something that's going to speak to the folks who are most impacted, with OPD's data itself saying that the majority of their police impact is on 3 to 6% of the population, I'm curious around how much of that 3 to 6% of the population that actually is at the end result of policing had anything to do with that message. So I'll end my comments with that.
Yeah, I'd agree in general on both of what the last two speakers said. Since the video is final, I mean, it's been done, and I don't know who the audience is or what the purpose of the video is, but I think it opens a larger question that maybe we can discuss either today or the next meeting in the context of our first actual substantive report, now that we'll have data, which is what is the sort of public communication and media plan. in what way will that data be released to various stakeholders who can draw their own conclusions, and that can be part of a meaty discussion. I think we've all been waiting for this for 3 years. And I'm excited to finally be able to issue a report, but then that's where I think the rubber will meet the road in terms of whatever kind of promotional opportunities there are to draw the public's attention, law enforcement's attention, everyone's attention to what will be actual data and actual information, and hopefully begin a really rich conversation across the state about changes and solutions.
Additional comments?
I have a couple things. Number one, I was interested to know how it would be disseminated. This video will people have to go onto our website to see it? Is it going to be a public service announcement? How will the public get to it? I think it is. I think we should have had more community input into the making of the video before it went to the final product, and maybe have a pre-screening, so if there were some aspects that we thought were a little bit too, did not speak to the issues, that perhaps some changes could have been made to the video. I think once we get it after the fact, it's like, it's a fait accompli that it's done. It's probably too expensive to redo, but I think in the future, if there's going to be any follow-up videos, perhaps there should be some community input, maybe some pre-screening to make sure that the community's input is made, and that way it may be more appreciative once it comes out.
Chief, did you have comments as well?
Excuse me. I did, and maybe begin with a question before a comment. Just for DOJ staff, can you remind us what the purpose of the video was?
So we were asked to work with our partner, our expert witness, our expert at Stanford, to create a video that focused on data integrity. So to ensure that the public understood how police agencies and the California Department of Justice were going to be ensuring that they could trust this data. And that is the only focus of this video. That was why we spoke with several community groups, professors, and law enforcement, including having the Attorney General start off and end the video to allow people to feel that there are processes in place for ensuring that once that information is collected, especially within the DOJ, it is maintained and the integrity of that data. We have other videos that were requested to be in the queue. One of them was set for potentially releasing in December that focused on how the data was collected. I hear everything that everyone is saying, and I appreciate those perspectives, but that was not the goal of this particular video. And we cannot at this point really discuss outcomes and data in a video because we don't have any of that information. It was only just finalized to us on April 1st. And so that could be a future video, and I think would be really interesting and worthwhile to do. But that is what we did.
So to that point then, if I just follow up with my comments, knowing that the purpose of the video was to inform about data integrity, I feel that it is a well-done professional video that accomplishes that stated purpose. There's good use from academics in the video to show the credibility and the academia side of our work as a board. And to the question about the intent of the data, that's a great question. I'm not sure this board really knows yet the intent of the data, and hopefully it's something we can get into and talk about more either today or in our future meetings.
Yeah, my discomfort was born not out of academic, professional, and integral participation of persons who created and crafted the video. This whole racial profiling board came out of an era and an environment of blatant mistrust on the part of the community with law enforcement in the state. And if we're going to ever fix anything, I think we need to bring into the arena of our attempt to adjust, to fix, and remediate a full definition of what is being brought to the arena, so everybody understands that. And I think some reference to that as a preamble to this, I think would fix the problem, would fix the matter. I have no disagreement with the integrity of the composition of the video, but just the lack of an introduction and definition that brings us together in the first place. That's all.
Perhaps we could make a suggestion that when it does go out for release, that maybe that can be included at least in a narrative format, just to kind of explain the purpose of that specific video, that it wasn't all encompassing, that it had a very specific role to it.
And my other comment would be that the original video that we put out that was introducing the board and its creation and what it's doing and introduced all of you all, we hope would serve that purpose. But I agree that we can connect the two videos better and as you said, add some narrative in that explains the two.
I think that would be extraordinarily helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
So could there be like links to the reports and the other
we could look
video?
into that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion, and I would add that, in anything we do, that we're trying to communicate with the public, that the public and the community are reflected in that work. And so that was what was nice about the first video, is that the community's voices were included. They were speaking firsthand about their experiences. So I think context and community should be elements of anything that we do.
I'll just make one other suggestion, Dave. If it's not too cumbersome, perhaps, and for future videos, at the point where there's a rough cut or design of it, that could be shared at a minimum with the chairs, if not other members, just to take a look and give feedback before it's too late.
Any additional comments on the video?
Yeah, I just want to get a response to how this video is going to be disseminated. How will people find out? Is it going to be on regular TV? Yeah, I just need to know. So it doesn't do any good to do a video and no one sees it.
It's going to be on YouTube, and it's going to be linked to the RIPA homepage, and our press office will do social media on it and send it out to our listserv as well. We've had really amazing success in doing it in those ways, and of course we ask that the board as well forward those links along and get those out to your networks as well.
Essentially disseminated the same way the report was disseminated. Except on YouTube and not just our.
I just want to add, I do, I appreciate all the comments. I think this is very helpful. I think having the links gives the context, but I do see a lot of value in addressing like a very specific issue which we're attempting to do here. And there may be then more specific issues down the road, but I think it's very impactful to be able just to focus on integrity, at least for me. And I did find, I think the public will be very interesting for the public to, first of all, appreciate all the work that the board members have been doing has resulted in this data collection in the first place. And I thought the point made about uniformity, I thought was very important. And a lot of folks, we don't work with data. Many of us don't work with data all the time. So just even having that point reinforced, I thought was very helpful.
After watching the video, I'll just share that, there's a lot of agencies in California that are going to be coming into the process. And looking at it from the law enforcement perspective, it's nice to see just a little snippet of what the computer screen looks like and how that process works, and the agencies are on board with doing it. Because to be honest, a lot of the agencies like myself that are coming in a couple of years, it's still a little foreign to us on what this is going to look like. And so I think the video is a nice piece to give it a little bit of context on what it's going to look like for the agency, specifically on doing that data entry and kind of softening the data entry side of it. Because frankly, everybody's a little worried on how much time it's going to take, and it seems like the feedback so far has been been pretty well received, that it's not time consuming, so to get the data in. So any additional from DOJ on item 3 then?
I think we could probably open it, unless there are other comments, we could probably open it up to Erin from CGIS to provide an update on the data.
Yes, good morning. My name is Erin Choi, and within DOJ, I work with a team that's specifically focusing on the data collection and submission. So I've prepared a brief update for you today. You have copies of the PowerPoint, and they're also available for the members of the public in the back of the room as well. Hopefully, getting that loaded. So today's meeting is very timely as far as the data collection and submission process goes. Today I wanted to provide you updates on 3 key areas. First, just to kind of confirm that April 1st was the deadline for the 8 largest agencies in the state. We've been referring to them as the Wave 1 agencies. April 1st was the deadline for them to submit their stock data from 2018 to the department. So that's been a major point of our focus. And then next I'll give an update of what's been happening with the Wave 2 agencies. That's the group of the 2nd largest agencies in the state that began collecting data required by RIPA as of January 1st of this year. And then I also want to give you some brief updates on other things that the team is going to be working on in 2019. So as far as the reporting goes, the data that we have now covers the period starting July 1st of 2018 through December 31st of 2018. And we have the numbers there in print and also on the screen. We received, as far as total stops, over 1.7 million stops. And that's involving over 1.8 million individuals in those incidents. Overall, the processing of those records through our system was successful, I would say. The system is checking for uniformity within the data and literally going over hundreds of different validation points on what the agencies are submitting to us. So overall, of that 1.7 million, we have flagged just over 19,000 records as having some type of error. We received the record, it will be available within the system, but as far as our checks go from the computer standpoint, we've detected some type of error. So overall, that would be a 98% success rate, that the data we're receiving adheres to the data standards that were spelled out in the initial legislation and the regulations. And we've kind of put that a chart together to highlight that. Of those 19,000 plus errors, they can be grouped into different categories. So I have some notes there of the type of errors. So one thing that we would flag is just first to make sure that the record we receive is complete. So making sure that any required fields have been provided, or there might be some instances where we received a response in a required field, but the value that was communicated to us doesn't match a value that was outlined in the regulations. So an example of that would be something where for reason for stop, the officer may have indicated that the reason for stop was reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. When that value is indicated, then additional data is expected to further describe the criminal activity. And for example, there were some cases where we didn't receive that further level of detail. So that's an example of the first bullet point. And of the 19,000 errors that we detected, approximately half of them are attributed to that type of situation where we were expecting something and it was blank, or we received a value that wasn't one of the prescribed values. The next type of category of error that we have, when officer has indicated something that doesn't match something else. So within the regulations, there's some data fields where the officer is going to be prompted to select all that apply. So they're presented a list of different options, and one of their responses may be to indicate that there was perhaps maybe no action taken. For this category of errors, they have indicated that no action was taken, but in fact they have selected another value. So that's an example of something that our computer system would be checking for. We received something that doesn't match up. It's invalid, because if you're selecting none or no action, then you shouldn't have selected something else. Our system still retains both of those values, so if that could be of help, we know both of those things that have been reported to us. The next largest category of errors that we have are instances where information was reported indicating that a particular offense code was involved in the stop. And the California Offense Code table literally has thousands and thousands of entries. So we received a value from that table, but it may have been that the officer picked a code that's been repealed. So we know what they selected, but that particular code may no longer be valid. So there's a category of errors that had that occur as well. And then next, we have something kind of similar to the other errors, instances where some kind of invalid combination was received. So this could be an instance where, for example, the officer did not indicate that a student was involved in the stop, but as part of the data submission, they provided that the location of stop was at a school. So somewhere along the lines, there's something invalid that we've detected. Again, if it would be helpful for analysis, we have that information retained in our system, but we do flag it because we've received something that we don't expect pursuant to the specifications. And then last but not least, we also have a small group of errors where a user has been provided a list of options and the instruction is to select all that apply. So, let's say maybe we're expecting them to choose from 1 through 7, and somehow in their local system, what they're reporting to us makes it appear as if the user selected number 1 twice. So we flag that as an error and we return a message back to the agency because we want to, make sure that they can fix that in their local system, and then it's just not something logical. We don't know if they were truly, 1 was really the only valid value, or if they were trying to send us something as a second value and something happened in the translation. So it's just alerting them that we received a duplicate response and we don't want to receive that. Yes.
Just a question. My technological prowess is minimal. But going forward, this is great as a start, but going forward, are there any technological fixes that could help this in real time as opposed to waiting until it's identified once it gets to DOJ? So for instance, required field missing or invalid, I fill things out all the time and it won't let me continue because I haven't completed the last section.
Right. I think for, kind of an inference, agencies did a lot of thorough testing with us, so these were things that we wouldn't have expected to receive at the end, but it may have just been some kind of edge case that they hadn't tested with us in their local system. So hopefully that will see a reduction in the errors going forward. And then we do have a small amount of errors that were related to the DOJ web application, which one agency was using, and just to kind of give you some more information about what that situation was. As part of our initial outreach, we learned from agencies that it will be typical for officers to get interrupted while they're doing something, so we need to be able to save their data as they're doing it. They may have to respond to an urgent call and revisit it later, so we give them that option to save partial data. But we hadn't put in a more stringent restriction that once they go back into the system, they automatically go back to that last record. We were leaving open the option for them to create a new stop. We want to give people flexibility because there's a lot of different things that can happen in the real world. So, maybe they got interrupted for a stop earlier in their shift. They've saved that partial data. They just completed a stop and they want to enter that latest data while it's freshest in their mind. We were giving them that option, but that may have led to some instances where we have a couple of hundred records that were hanging out there and were never fully completed. So we were giving them a dashboard to try to bring this to their attention. Just within the last month, we implemented some changes to that to even make it more prominent. But that's an example of something, and I'm sorry if this is getting down in the weeds. You can tell this is what I work on full time. So yes, we do have some use cases where we're trying to make some adjustments in the system to lessen the likelihood of receiving partial data where required data has not been completed. So that really kind of summarizes what we have received as far as the 2018 records go. Since the deadline was just last week, I know my colleagues from the research team are going to be also providing you updates about what the next steps are going to be to analyze that data. But as far as the collection and the submission of data, we do have the 2018 records that have been submitted. Next, we have also been working closely with the agencies in what we call Wave 2. Those are the next 7 largest agencies in the state that started collecting data on January 1st of this year. And just as a quick reminder, we have the list of agencies and how they are going about collecting and submitting the data to DOJ. So just to give you a snapshot, as of last Friday, we have already received data from Fresno Police Department, Sacramento Police Department, and San Jose Police Department for the records that they've been collecting for 2019. And total, as of Friday, we received just over 45,000 records from those agencies. And to this point in time, we've only flagged 2 as being in an error status. Did you have a question, sir?
If I could just go back for a second to the 19,000 records that were flagged, is it disproportionate between agencies who use their own application as opposed to others who use the DOJ, or is there are you seeing any trends in that regard?
There were some agencies that have no errors from their local systems. So if that's something that folks are interested in, we could go back and provide that information down to the agency level. And really what I was seeing more so is that if an agency did have errors, it may be something that they didn't realize when they first went live in July, and they have since corrected. So it may have been something that's already been resolved before the reporting period was closed out at the end of the year, but they just had those issues early on. And then aside from working with those agencies, we are also focusing on additional activities for 2019. Some things that we are planning, for example, is to host a lessons learned session with the various agencies. We also want to include some agencies that are going to be starting to collect. Some of the questions are there's always things that we can learn and strive to do better. So that will be a point of emphasis for us. Then something else that we know from the agencies is that there's always turnover. There's always going to be new people getting onboarded to this system. So we will be planning and conducting a series of recurring workshops with those agencies that have already started the process to help them onboard new staff. And then last but certainly not least, we will be reaching out to those agencies in reporting waves 3 and 4 because although we're working with the largest 15 agencies now in the state, we have over 400 that are going to be coming into this process. So we want to make sure that they're going to be well equipped to come on board by their mandatory timeline, or even if they're interested in collecting data early and submitting data early, that's certainly an option as well. Any other questions or information you need? Okay, well with that, I'm going to turn things over then to my colleagues in the Research Center.
Thank you.
I believe in your materials you have a copy of the Research Center presentation. Good morning and thank you for inviting me to speak. My name is Dr. Jamie Scott and I'm a research associate at the DOJ Research Center. And so the purpose of this presentation is to introduce the Research Center and then also give you a brief introduction into how we assist you as members of the RIPA Advisory Board. So I'm going to begin with a brief introduction into the Research Center more broadly, and then I'm going to move on to discuss the Police Practices Research Lab, and then kind of delve into kind of how we have assisted you all in the past. So the Research Center was established in 2018 by Attorney General Javier Becerra to serve as the empirical research arm for the California Department of Justice. We are a bureau within the Criminal Justice Information Services Division, also referred to as CJIS. It is the mission of the Research Center to apply a scientific approach to legal review, policy analysis, data analysis, and empirical studies that inform data-driven decisions made throughout DOJ. So to this end, the Research Center provides a variety of research and data services that includes synthesizing research and literature reviews, data collection via surveys, interviews, and other similar means. We provide statistical analysis, and we assist department programs with mandated reports, such as the RIPA report. We also fulfill data requests through our data request unit. So I touched on the services that the Research Center provides, but not our expertise. So the Research Center staff consists of a diverse group of social science researchers and analysts, and therefore our staff have diverse research backgrounds and experiences. We have staff all the way from the bachelor degree level all the way up to several PhDs. And our staff have experience in quantitative and qualitative research. The disciplinary perspective of the Research Center staff is very diverse, and it includes anthropology, business, criminal justice, data science, economics, political science, psychology, and sociology. Importantly, the Research Center has expertise in a wide variety of topic areas, such as immigration issues, health issues, environmental issues, and other criminal justice issues such as recidivism, use of force research, and evaluating policies and practices. So this slide just provides a current look at our Research Center Bureau. We are continuing to grow at a pretty rapid pace in response to a need for research and analysis in the public and within the government. We have an area dedicated to reviewing and approving data request applications. And this unit also assists with providing data visualizations through the California Attorney General's Open Justice website. Additionally, the Research Center also consists of the Social Justice Research and Policy Branch, which is further comprised of two units. The first unit is the Research Portfolios, and this unit consists of several research areas that include environment, health, immigration, to name a few. The second unit is the Police Practices Research Lab, and for the remainder of the presentation, I'm going to focus on this lab since many of the staff that are assigned to the Research Lab also assist you all for RIPA-related activities. So this is the staffing within the Police Practices Research Lab who work on RIPA. So the Research Lab also includes other folks who do not work on RIPA, but also work on related criminal justice matters. So the Police Practices Research Lab is currently overseen by Dr. Randy Chance. I introduced myself earlier, but my background is I received a PhD in anthropology with an emphasis in African diaspora studies. We also have Kevin Walker, who is over there, and has an MS in criminal justice. And we have 2 research analysts, Tiana Osborne, who will be assisting with analyzing SOP data, and she's currently working on an MA in psychology. And then we also have Evelyn Reynoso, who is also a research analyst and will be providing assistance with SOP data analyses. And she has a BA in criminal justice and sociology. So again, we are the team of researchers that assist you all as members of the advisory board with analysis to support the RIPA board's annual report. So the lab serves as the analytical arm for RIPA and will be responsible for analyzing SOP data for the 2020 and future reports. We are the primary point of contact within the Research Center for the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. So this slide also provides examples of some of the work the team has done in the past to assist you all. And so that includes analyzing civilian complaint data, clarifying evidence-based approaches to SOP data analysis, contributing to the development of best practice guides, and summarizing prior research on racial and identity profiling. We can also span all this work over time and are not limited to doing the work we have done so far. We recognize that as needs change or as new information is uncovered during the research process, adjustments to our work products will also need to be made. So by way of conclusion, I want to thank you all for allowing me to speak. If you have any questions, especially with how we can assist you all as members of the RIPA board, feel free to track down either myself or Kevin. But with that, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I have one quick question. The data that you're seeing come in, the 1.7 million records, as that grows, do you anticipate, or as the staff is going to grow, to keep up with that?
Yeah, exactly. We do anticipate our staff growing to help accommodate the research needs.
Any additional questions?
Yes. As the data comes in, how soon is the analysis going to be made? Do you wait until you get a certain number of stops, or do you wait for 1 million, or do you make the analysis based on the amount of data that you receive?
So we're beginning to analyze the 2018 data, and I believe Kevin has more insight into that.
Yeah, so just getting at that question, we won't analyze data prior to the end of a data collection period. So currently, we only have complete data for the last 6 months of 2018. As records come in for 2019 as they are currently, we're not sure that the data that is submitted to us is representative of all stops that are occurring, because agencies aren't required to finish submitting all of their data until April 1st of the following year, each year. And so currently we'll look at 2018. Next year we'll be able to look at 2018 and 2019 and so on into the future. So data analysis will always occur after the data collection period has closed for the previous calendar year.
So can you give us just a 1, 2, 3 of what you're going to be doing between now and the end of the year with regard to that 2018 data?
Sure. So the data collection period is just finished. So currently we're in working with our IT folks that have stored the data to get it in an analyzable format. We'll then begin exploring it for checking for not only the issues that Aaron and their team have identified already that were programmatically identified, but any other issues that may have slipped through the cracks during the automated process that we might be able to, as humans looking at the data, be able to discern that slipped through before. So examining it for errors, and then prepping it, analyzing it, and writing up those analyses to put into you guys' report. You'll all have a chance to take a look at those, when the report comes out, give us feedback. We can go back and make any revisions that need to be, and then those analyses will be published in your report.
So normally we start looking at a draft in the fall, mid-fall, late fall. So is that when we would expect to see some draft analyses?
Yes, I would hope that you're all able to take a look at some analyses at that point. Now, I can't say, once we begin looking at the data, there may be other questions that come up that take us a little bit longer to address. And so there may be sections of the analyses that are still in a draft format that aren't included. It'll be included in a revised version. So that's not to say that the first version you see will include everything, but we will be working over the rest of this year to include as many analyses in there as we can by the time that we need to submit that information to you all for review.
Thank you.
Andrea, right now, because this is going to be the first year with data, we are hoping to have a rough draft to the board by the September. We're in April now. By the September board meeting.
Right.
But as Kevin said, it may have holes with regard to certain aspects, but we're hoping to get you as much as possible for that next meeting. And that is going to be our full board meeting. And then, I hope I'm not stepping on something you were going to mention earlier, but as we have in the past, we're going to try to do between now and then the subcommittee meetings to kind of build those pieces and get them in there in a good draft form for you earlier than we have in the past.
We're hoping to get a lot of the work done this year because in the smaller groups, because it would help facilitate that it helps the research center get at the questions with the smaller groups.
I had to follow up, so I'm a little confused because in Dr. Scott's presentation, it said that their research lab has completed a number of activities and listed those activities, including analyzing of police use of force data and all of the other subtopics there. So has nothing been done with the data that was collected the last 4 months in 2018, or has it been?
So I believe that slide is referring to last year's report, if I'm not mistaken.
Right,
yeah, so the last year's report included some of the AB 71 data analysis, and that deals with police use of force, and so we provided some of the
Well, it lists a whole
content.
bunch of other stuff too.
So that was in reference to the AB 71 data that we
Okay.
collected. And
And
then we
that's
also, in the last report, we also assisted with development of the best practice guides. And we collected, and in a previous report, we also looked at kind of the landscape of research that is available on stop data analysis to kind of help inform plans for stop data analysis.
You haven't done anything with the actual data that's come in then?
Not with the RIPA's stop data.
Right.
That has, we've received that data, I think, April 1, 2019. So we just received it like a week ago.
Yeah, we didn't have it prior to Monday.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
One quick question, Dr. Scott, just thank you for your presentation. And just, I want to make sure that I'm clear. So you all's research center, the main focus of you all's center is to analyze the data that's collected by law enforcement?
We work under the direction of the RIPA board to analyze the stop data.
And the group that is working as a part of this research center is also a part of the function of you all's group to also be working in partnership with the law enforcement agencies to implement the practices of collecting data in their local departments, or is that separated or firewalled in some case? And so there is some type of, not firewall, but there is some separation of those practices?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I don't want to overstep, but yes. So that would be the focus of my team. We are both within CGIS, the overall division, but within separate bureaus.
Thank you.
I have also another question.
question. This might be looking further ahead, but I'm wondering as the data comes in and seeing, potentially some law enforcement agencies that have numbers in terms of, racial and identity profiling that are particularly high if one of the functions, I know you guys are working on analysis, but in order to execute, the vision of eliminating racial profiling, if one of the roles of this center or another center could be like consultative basis, let's work on your data, let's work on seeing why this is going on, if we can address some of these policies and practices and make recommendations, is that part of, the DOJ's vision to provide that sort of consultancy?
I would say that is definitely a part of the vision. So yeah, we would be more than happy to contribute to some of that work.
Very good. Any additional questions for Dr. Scott? Okay. Well, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like moving up to item number 4, correct, Kelsey?
Yes, so as many of you know, on February 5th, we had a joint meeting of the Stop Data and Evidence-Based Data subcommittees that was structured as a roundtable that discussed the analysis that was coming in. We wanted to hold it as early as possible in the year to help inform the research center on what the kinds of questions that the RIPA board wants answered, so they could get a head start on thinking about the different analytical techniques that would be most appropriate to get at the answers to those questions. And we wanted to ensure that we began and continued an open dialogue between the RIPA board, academic researchers, and law enforcement who's collecting it, everyone who is going to be looking at this data, analyzing it, to make sure that the questions out there, limitations, the different pros and cons of different approaches were discussed and out there, and very much an open dialogue. So this was one of, we hope, the first roundtable formalized open discussion that will continue over this data collection. I can pass it over to Kevin to give a little bit of a overview of the outcomes of that, and also Andre and the sheriff are there as well. I also included the meeting minutes from that roundtable for each of the board members if you wanted to review. We don't need to vote on those because they're the subcommittee. We'll vote on that in the next subcommittee meetings, but I just thought they may be helpful for those of you who are unable to attend.
All right, thank you. So Kelsey just introduced it, but yes, so it was a joint committee meeting between the Stop Data Subcommittee and the Evidence-Based Research Subcommittee. It was held in Oakland. It was a little bit different of a format that we hope people enjoyed than your typical subcommittee meeting, in that it was all in person. Everyone was sitting around a large group of tables, and it wasn't a teleconference from all over the state. So we were hoping that would contribute to facilitating a good conversation. We think that it met that goal. So the point of the meeting was kind of twofold. To hear about some of the experiences that law enforcement agencies have had as they were onboarding and getting ready to start collecting, and their first stages of collecting this information, so that we could learn from them. And then also to hear from stakeholders about what they'd like to learn from the data, and also we came to find out what they'd like to learn about the data as well, so that we could use that information to inform the future of the RIPA board's work. And so we had law enforcement agencies from across the state send representatives to attend the meeting. We had a representative from California Highway Patrol, Long Beach, Riverside, Sacramento, San Diego, San Francisco, and San Jose Police Departments all attend. And then we also had members from various academic institutions, as well as the Center for Policing Equity sent their Vice President, Chris Burbank, to attend. We also had Alex Childress-Wood and Amy Shoemaker from the Stanford Computational Policy Lab attend. We had Dr. Heedy, who's here today, also from Stanford, attend and participate. We had Dr. Glazer and Dr. Raphael from UC Berkeley. And lastly, we had Dr. Owens from UC Irvine also attend and participate in discussions. And so the meeting kind of started by discussing the experiences from the agencies, the Wave 1 and 2 agencies that were in attendance. And we learned from them talking about their experiences and how they trained up and implemented the policies that were required to get the stop data collection off the ground. We learned about some of the challenges, and when everyone can, I understand that everyone here has copy of the minutes, so I'm not going to cover every challenge that was gone over in a short review, but just some examples of the types of things we learned about were that some agencies were having issues with needing to scrub unique identifying information from the narrative fields. We're aware of this beforehand, but they kind of outlined how much that's become an issue for them. We heard from the California Highway Patrol in that they have specific, stops that are kind of specific to the California Highway Patrol of commercial vehicles and needing to find out a way to create a policy for their officers to record those stops correctly. We also heard about some agencies having pre-existing stop data collection that wasn't RIPA mandated and that they then replaced with RIPA mandates, but they had already had local mandates to create reports. But now, since they're collecting different information than they were previously collecting, they're having to find ways to fulfill those reports that were mandated locally for them using the AB 953 stop data. And so that was a unique problem that some agencies, at least one agency, was encountering. And then also just time constraints. We've always thought about, okay, how long does this take for officers to fill out on the street? But also they also talked about supervisory review for the agencies that are being proactive and auditing their data internally and double checking to ensure that when they receive stop data records, they also receive arrest records, citations, field interview cards, and vice versa, so that they're ensuring that their officers are completing the stop data records to ensure the integrity of the data, but it also takes additional time, so they kind of went over that with us. So those are some examples of the types of issues that we heard about from the agencies as they're getting ready to complete the stop data collection for the first year. And then there were also discussions between the attendees from the law enforcement agencies and also the researchers, and they covered a lot of topics regarding the stop data and its collection, ranging from how statewide analyses differ from maybe more specialized local analyses, issues surrounding what third-party data is out there to use and how to use it as comparison data, issues surrounding data standardization, as well as the effects of collecting RIPA data in general. And so at the end of the meeting, there were a lot of things that are covered that are also, I would encourage everyone to read through that wasn't able to attend, to read through the meeting minutes. They go through a lot of things that were discovered. But at the end, there were some general questions or topic areas that I think that would be helpful for the RIPA board to consider moving forward and engaging stakeholders and also working with the Department of Justice to find answers to. I've just listed 10, but that's not to say that this is like an all-inclusive list. I would encourage everyone to look at the meeting minutes, but some of them that came up during the course of this meeting that were discussed, some questions were, what data element hierarchies should be put in place for oftentimes in the stop data you're able to collect, officers are able to select more than one option, and so developing a hierarchy to use in analysis moving forward. How to treat differences between stops that are made in response to a call for service in comparison to more self-initiated stops that weren't made in response to a call for service. How to increase compliant checks to ensure data quality and integrity. How and if to use victimization UCR, Uniform Crime Report, or NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting System data to further contextualize stop data was discussed. How do local comparison data differ between jurisdictions and agencies? Specifically, there were some conversations around using calls for service to place some context around stop data, but people noted that not all agencies may collect calls for service information the same way, and so comparing across agencies can be complicated in using that. How do training and policies surrounding RIPA data collection differ across agencies? Because that could be important in understanding why we might observe some differences. How can the RIPA board and the Department of Justice assist agencies that may not be able to bring on specialized staff or dedicated staff or funding sources to analyze their own RIPA data and use it to inform their decisions moving forward? How do changes in agency policies and procedures change their data over time? They're being law enforcement agencies. And how has the collection of RIPA stop data changed the way that law enforcement officers and law enforcement agencies operate and conduct business? And lastly, something that was brought up towards the end of the meeting was just for consideration moving forward is how can RIPA data be enhanced through potential future regulatory cleanup? And so all of these things were discussed to varying degrees during the course of this meeting. And I think that it would be good for us to all keep these things in mind as we move forward in our work, and hopefully we can have more productive conversations with the various stakeholders as we did in the last meeting, moving forward in the subcommittee meetings this year and in future years. So if there's any more questions about it, then I think we can get to it, but I'll pass it back over to Kelsey.
I also would open up to the board members who are in attendance and throw the ball back to you guys. See if you guys have any other takeaways.
Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, Kevin. I thought it was a really great conversation, and it was much more free flow than we normally have our meetings. And it was well attended, and I thought it was an excellent opportunity to really understand what the challenges and opportunities were for the data collection. And my takeaway was there is the possible and the practical, well, I'll say the optimal, possible, practical, and everybody has a different idea of what those things are, and so getting everyone in the room together was really helpful. So, one person would throw out an idea of, well, what about, can we analyze the data to tell us to answer this question? And then the data folks would say, well, no, that's crazy talk. No, you can't do that. That's like because of these problems that we have with the data analysis, but we could do this. And so it was a really good push and pull, and I would just encourage us to do more of that. That was really helpful. Hopefully it was helpful to you, to the research center that's going to be analyzing all of the data and help you prioritize what are the questions that you need to answer. So well done, Department of Justice.
What I thought was really interesting about the discussion was how much for the researchers and academics, they were so interested to hear from law enforcement how they were implementing and interpreting different aspects of our regulations and how it can really make a difference. And that it really, to me, highlighted that we have to really keep these discussions going and inviting law enforcement to our subcommittee meetings and meetings to discuss, like, really on the ground how our different agencies, there are some areas where there's some room for interpretation, and to see what we can do to try to standardize it as much as possible. Because it just seemed to me that a lot of our guests from universities were asking lots of questions, and it really seemed very important to them, and really emphasizing to us that that where there's going to be differences among agencies on how they're interpreting that could skew our data.
I think for the future, I think that's a great committee to keep going and have those discussions ongoing, because there was a lot of information shared, which is going to be really important. We bring in all the other agencies as well. We might need a bigger room down the road and all the agencies on board, but I think it'll be great to have that where both sides can share with each other to try to get to the heart of what everybody's trying to look for and accomplish. So, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo those comments. I think it was a brilliant idea to bring that group together. The diversity of opinion and perspective really enriched that conversation. So I just want to applaud DOJ staff for bringing that group together. There's a comment made at the end. I want to make sure we at some point circle back to that, maybe hear from our Wave 1 agencies. So I've been around long enough to recognize there are actually some of our Wave 1 agencies, say that 3 times fast, here with us today. But to understand more about the use of force question that was brought up, and that the current form doesn't allow for officers or deputies to talk about why that force was used or offenders' actions in that setting, and is that potentially problematic for the work of building trust in our communities if we don't have that information leading up to it. So maybe a public comment or a break we could touch base on, just to hear more how that's affecting our Wave 1 agencies who have been down that road so far.
Any additional comments about the meeting? Go ahead, Kelsey.
I have a kind of administrative suggestion, given that those two subcommittees work so well together, and when we first put those subcommittees together, the STOP data was more geared around what would go into the regulations, and the evidence base would look at kind of the analytics. And now that we've come to this phase in our project, I would like to suggest combining those two subcommittees officially, and wanted to see there's actually a lot of overlap in the membership as well.
That seems to make a lot of sense. Should we move to merge the two committees?
Do we need official action on that, or can it just?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, very good.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Back to 5 subcommittees, from 6.
So I think now's a good time to move on to public comment.
Yeah,
And we'll open it up to public comment. Anyone wishing to make a comment, please come forward. You're welcome to state your name and maybe the area of the state you're from. Anyone like to make a public comment? Do we want to look at taking a quick break and then coming back and moving on to the last few items?
Sure, what, a 15-20 minute break, it's up to you all.
Everyone think about 15 minutes would be okay?
Be great.
Okay, let's take a 15-minute break and we adjourn at 11:48.